And we are recording. Welcome back to the Indian Science Show. Hey, Annie, it's good to have you again. It's good to be back.
Hi, Lecha. Yes, it's good to be back.
We've been gone for almost a whole year now. It's hard to comprehend that.
It doesn't feel like it's been a year, but I can definitely tell. You and I haven't really even talked too much within this year as well.
Yeah, that's right. And there's been a lot going on in our lives, and we both had a lot to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's totally true. We haven't talked since what, February? Or was it January?
It was around then. Well,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes this summer too.
Yeah, so
Like
not as
sporadic.
much as we used to. That's
Hmm.
for sure. And we like the idea of Indian time and getting things done when they're supposed to get done in due time, but we definitely took it too far this time.
It was quite longer than we expected, but I
Yeah.
think we care coming back, feeling better, feeling healthier, and ready to be consistent with the podcast.
Yes, as consistent as consistency will allow. And
Yes.
so we're both pretty much where we left off last time. I'm still living in Montana, and Annie, you're in
I'm
the
still in
famous Jackson, Wyoming.
Jackson, Wyoming, holding strong. It was -10 the last few days. It has been so cold. I miss Montana.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been about that here. Oh, -10 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
Oh, wow. Yeah, we haven't, it's not that cold here.
it's gotten really cold.
I was thinking Celsius at first. I was like, yeah, it's about what it is here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cold.
Hmm.
That's not the fun kind of cold.
No, and it's only November, so I am kind of scared how these next few months are going to go.
Yeah, especially with people that maybe can't afford their electric bill. So that always worries me in the winter, like when people can't keep their house warm or maybe they don't
Mhm.
have a house. That sucks.
Oh yeah, that is one thing that has been interesting living in Jackson is that our median household income is huge. I mean, there's a lot of millionaires, billionaires that live in Jackson. And a lot of the people that help in restaurants, clean hotel rooms, work in lodges, they have to commute quite a bit of ways. So they don't really live in Jackson.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's a beautiful, beautiful place, I will admit, but there is some things about living here that you don't understand until you're like here looking at it that has made it kind of hard as well. Um, we get a lot of tourists and it is nuts. I thought Polson was bad. Man, I would love Polson days because it's nonstop here.
Hmm. Yeah, because I bet you get a lot of skiers too that come through there.
Yeah, we have like a couple months. Like right now is kind of slow, October slow, April. Anytime other than that, we're packed with skiers or then of course Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park.
Hmm. I really want to go to Teton more and hike around there. Those mountains are so
Yeah,
epic.
it's beautiful. I definitely want to
Yeah,
do a
it
lot
is.
more. I prioritized my family this summer, so I didn't really do a lot around Jackson and Grand Teton. I did go watch my niece quite a bit play softball, which was fun.
Cool.
But next year, I am kind of hoping to do a little bit more exploring.
Yeah, me too. I meant to go hiking more this summer and I didn't really go hiking.
Mhm.
Not like I want to anyway. And so as you can see, we're back, but and we're also doing some new stuff. We're going to start releasing on video on YouTube and doing things pretty much how we were doing in the past, but adding
Mhm.
more content and being more specific, and so we can be consistent and also maintain the same quality that we were used to.
Mhm.
So thanks for sticking with us, everybody. And anybody new, welcome to the show. This is the Indian Science Show. And today's episode is all about being Indigenous in the modern world, which is a concept that, I mean, it's pretty loose. we're just
Yeah.
basically talking about our own lives. And we came up with this fancy phrase that we were like, oh, wow, that's so deep.
Mhm. And I always think about it when I talking to people in my job about Indigenous relationships and building connections, and like my own kind of challenges that I face, that being Indigenous today, in the modern world, has been such a fun challenge, I will say, um, that has really led me to love visitor services and teaching people and visitors that come in, building deeper connections to land. But it also makes me really love Disney World and like escaping and like being with my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something I've always and I don't know if I would say I enjoyed it, but I was always honored, or I felt like obligated. It was a responsibility to let other people know that about what being Indian is all about. And it
Mhm,
was usually at powwows when there'd be white people and they'd come and ask me. And it wasn't always white people. Sometimes it'd be Asian people or black people. And I sometimes saw some of the other young kids, they would make fun of them or they would
mhm,
ignore them and then talk a bunch of crap behind their back. And I never liked that. I always thought, why are you doing that? If we really want people to understand us, we got to be willing to share about ourselves and talk and not
mhm.
be afraid to be real with people.
Yeah, that's kind of the tough part is, first of all, being comfortable enough to ask somebody a question regarding that. And then also, I've come to realize that sometimes it does feel like a little overwhelming or like burdensome when you're constantly trying to tell people.
Yeah, especially in your
Um,
position.
yeah, but at the same time, I understand that people really don't know.
Hmm.
Indigenous tribes, a lot of them don't know ancestral lands or who was in that state or city before they were moved. Um, and just kind of opening people's eyes is sometimes challenging, but in the end, I have a great support team, um, that has made my job a lot. It's been fun. It's been a fun year. Um, Focused a lot on my job, probably. Um, I used it as a good distraction to get over a very hard, abusive relationship. So um, it was tough, but I did learn a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about my future and my career, which I won't regret. It was nice.
Hmm. Yeah, probably a lot about like boundary setting and where your boundaries are and stuff like that. And that's hard. That's really hard to learn that and then act it out in your life in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And well, my year hasn't been that great. My year sucked. Really, it's been the last 3 years of my life have just really not been good. They've been really crappy. And then 2022 came around, and I kind of stopped. I just stopped doing most of everything except what was absolutely necessary for my house and my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't good. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for people I was working with. And so now I'm getting back to it and getting back to people and reconnecting with people, and that is good and it feels good. And it's only bad if we respond to it badly. That's what I've learned about a lot of the hard things that I've dealt with
Mm-hmm.
is, yes, it sucks. Yes, it might be terrible, but how I deal with it either makes it worse or I can deal with it better and actually get something good out of it, no matter how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I really had to rebuild and relearn over the last 6 to 8 months. And that's really why we're back, is we both were able to heal and rebuild our lives and what we really wanted to do with our lives over the last 6 to 8 to 10 months. And now we're here now
Mm-hmm.
doing another podcast. And I couldn't be happier to be here again and just to bullshit with you.
I know it's weird when we were in Syracuse, kind of where we started the podcast. Um, we were constantly together. I think like almost every day,
Yeah.
to some capacity, whether it was class, whether it was working on the podcast. We also lived like 3 houses away from each other, so that was extremely helpful.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that was really weird too. We didn't know each other at all, didn't even know of each other's existence. And we ended up in the same program and
mhm.
3 houses down from each other
Yeah.
on kind of the ghetto side of the street,
Yep.
and found out we're really close cousins.
Yep.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the trippiest meeting or chance meetings I've ever had in my life, and definitely grateful because you turned out to be a really cool, fun person to talk to.
Oh yeah. And I don't think I would have, I do think the podcast helped me a lot with my now job in visitor services, being able to talk about this, and also the program that we were into really kind of opened my eyes. I had never thought about becoming somebody who was going to be at a visitor center all day talking to people, um, trying to create programs, trying to incorporate Indigenous value systems. And it has been a fun journey. And I do think the podcast a lot. And of course, our listeners now, you can look back at previous episodes, and I'm sure that first one is funny to probably re-listen to. It's
Yeah.
been a while since I've re-listened to it, but I definitely have felt a lot of more, I do feel a lot more confident when it comes to public speaking. And I do think a lot of it does revolve around the podcast. So I enjoy our conversations. It's why we started the podcast. And I'm glad that we are finally back to talking and having our fun conversations about science
And Indian stuff.
Yes.
Yes, me too. And although I've been really pretty focused on trying to become a better speaker for a lot longer than we've been doing the podcast, I can totally see how it's helped me in a lot of ways as well, become even better at speaking, especially the flow of it,
Mhm.
and not being afraid to just say things and let them flow naturally, which
Mhm.
is what happens in a normal conversation. But when you're trying to do a podcast back and forth like we do, it can feel really clunky, but we seem
Yeah.
to have a pretty good flow with it.
Mhm. Well, it does help that we are, while we still have a lot of similar values, you really like different forms of science than I like really different forms of science. And I think that does help our conversations, how we aren't really the same type of conversation.
Yeah, and I think that makes for a funner conversation too. If you agree on everything, and you have all the same interests and all the same values, and you're just kind of, I think it's like it neutralizes
Mhm.
the conversation and it stops being so fun. And I wish that more people would take that to heart and really cherish people that disagree with you, because not only are you going to learn how to speak better and articulate your ideas better in a more healthy way, but you might learn something that
Mhm.
you didn't know before. And I know I've learned a lot from you, especially about the just the variations in how you can look at plant biology.
Mhm.
I'd always loved smelling flowers, but I'd never really thought about them in a context of memory or of therapy. But it's always been something that has been there, that those certain smells remind you of things, but I never really thought about it in a scientific way. And that
Mhm.
stuff's fascinating.
It is. And I of course talk about how you are a lot, your focus in what I appreciated was the philosophy of science, and really trying to understand a perspective that truly I couldn't understand before you and I started talking about philosophers. How does that play into indicators?
Yeah.
How does that play into like your normal life moving forward? And I definitely think that it's helped open my mind to a different capacity. I was very much a hard science type of person. And so your brain and your mind and like your spirit and all of these can have different aspects in your life, and very much appreciate it. And I do think it shows that I was obsessed with this series on Netflix that I could not stop talking about for like the first like 2 days that I watched it. But it is kind of one of those that you really got to like think about science in a whole different capacity, which is sometimes hard when you're so used to the fine constructs of equations and values and all of this hard science.
Yeah, I love a good balanced chemical formula, balanced equations. I love algebra. And at the end of the day, though, my first interests were philosophy and history and engineering. So it's always been a mixed approach for me, and I've always valued the quantitative and the qualitative side of things. And philosophy is such a weird subject because most of it's not that useful. It's just fun to think about and talk about.
Mhm.
But there are some philosophies that are very, pragmatic and stoic, and they actually offer real solutions to everyday life.
Mhm.
With that being said, we're happy to be back, and I'm really excited for the future of the podcast because I feel like I felt kind of in the beginning where there was so much opportunity. I had so
Mhm.
much energy and vision for the future. It seems really clear now. And so we're going to use this first episode. Yeah, we talked a little bit about, being Indigenous in the modern world, which is a pretty open, wide subject. But we wanted to finish off this episode by letting everybody know, all of our listeners that stuck around, that we're super grateful. Number one, that you're still here with us, but
Mhm.
also what's coming up next.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fun new things. I think let's touch a little bit on the YouTube. So we are trying to do some new videos, which should be interesting. But also, one of my favorite episodes that we've talked about since I think the beginning, I have probably mentioned this a lot, but is thanatology.
Mm.
That's going to be one of our first episodes that we will be releasing.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one. That when you first hear it, or at least when I first heard it, I thought of Thanos, and it makes a lot of sense because it's the study of death.
Mhm.
And there's all sorts of aspects to it that, in my view, are very positive. It's not just this negative, oh, let's study death, but it's
Mhm.
really a lot about life. And we'll get into that in very much depth and detail on the podcast that we'll be releasing next after this one.
Yep.
So you can count on that coming out next week. And the one after that, we're going to explore the words wild and wilderness as controversial words that we disagree with at a very fundamental level. But it seems to be that there's a shifting paradigm also in management and other scientists' perspective on what wild is or is
Mhm.
not. And so we'll dive into that for another episode in the following week.
Mhm.
And then this next one is a trippy one. And there's this new series on Netflix. What is that called? Ancient Apocalypse. And
Yes.
it's really fascinating. I don't really, especially that the episode where he does get into Glacial Lake Missoula, which will be the topic that we're coming at this from, the angle
Mhm.
that we're going to look at this at, and the idea that Glacial Lake Missoula was potentially a result not just of a warming climate, but maybe some kind of an impact event.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And we'll talk about Graham Hancock. We'll talk about all sorts of different things, including archaeology, geology, and stuff like that.
Mhm. It'll be fun. We all know I love Glacier Lake Missoula. So when that came up, I was heavily invested in this. So if you have the chance, I would watch it. It's 8 episodes, and they're about 30 minutes each. So if you have, I would watch it now. And then when we talk about it, you might understand it a little bit as well. Um, we're going to talk about also getting back into our Revolution series, which will be fun. Hopefully, we'll have a special guest. We'll talk about some
Mm.
tools.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. The tool revolution.
Yep.
And the revolution series, just as a quick reminder to everybody, it's an ongoing series where we're trying to start from the earliest, most important revolutionary thing that happened in our evolution as a species.
Mhm.
And the first one is about fire. And so now we're going to get into tools, and
Yep.
and that might segue a bit into language as well, because in
Mhm.
my view, language is a cultural tool that we use to transmit knowledge between each other and down the generations. But
Mhm.
we'll get into that when we get to that
Yes.
episode.
There's a lot of fun episodes to come in that series.
Yeah. And we'll also, and like I said earlier, we're going to be posting on YouTube now. And so this video is going to come up on YouTube, obviously, or clearly. And we're also going to be doing shorter ones going along with this being Indigenous in the modern world theme.
Mhm.
we're going to explore making fire, as well as things like how we like to brew a coffee, and also looking at plants and going on small hikes. And it won't be necessarily filled with a lot of words and content in that way, but just showing a little bit about how we live our lives. And especially because we live in relatively similar climates. But do you have a wood stove at your house?
Yeah, I have a wood fireplace.
Okay. Is that your primary heat, or do you have other, like a
Yeah,
base
I have the fancy baseboards and a
baseboards?
furnace, so
Oh, okay.
I,
So
I do have both.
yeah, for us, that's our only source of heat besides hooking up a heater to the plug-in. So we have to chop wood. We
Yeah.
have to have everything clean and dry, and it's quite a bit of preparation every fall. And even throughout the winter, you got to maintain a lot to keep a wood stove hot and your home heated, especially if it's a large home.
Mhm.
And we have our old WordPress page is still there, but we're no longer updating it. We're not posting any podcasts on there anymore. All of it's going on to just directly to our hosting site. But you can find us at all the usual places. We're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, or it's Apple Podcasts now, right? Yeah.
Yep, and Google Podcasts.
That's right. So
Yep.
as far as I know, we're on all the platforms. I don't know of one that we're not on. So with that being said, we used to stay in touch with people through our WordPress page and through email, but we realized it's better if people stay tuned into our social media, and then you can DM us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and we'll get back to you that way. And it'll be a lot more consistent, and we'll get back to you right away.
Yeah, I know we're still kind of getting caught up with some previous messages, so keep an eye out, but that will be the best way to contact. I already have too many emails, and sometimes it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
How many I have to check. So it's just kind of nice to be able to post to social media more often and also interact with visitors a lot more than what we have in the past, where you're just kind of posting a video or a podcast episode and leaving it at that. We do want to have lots of interactions with everybody. Let us know if you guys have any fun episodes that you want us to talk about as well.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to mention that. That's a really good idea. I would really love to hear ideas that people would like us to cover, especially if it relates to Montana or any of our particular specialties. Be like with me, it's ecology and philosophy and the history and development of science. Annie is into conservation biology and smell, as well as how that affects our brain, and also now customer service and interacting with the
public
public.
lands. Yeah.
Which is, it's really important. It's actually a pretty difficult job to do customer service and do it well.
I will say, be nice to all those people in customer service.
Yeah.
Thank your park rangers. COVID has not only been hard for everybody, but there was a massive influx of people when COVID happened to get into public lands. And that led to a lot of people feeling pretty overwhelmed with a huge number of people. And while that is wonderful, please make sure to just be happy with them. They go through a lot. A lot of them only are there for the summer, then they have to go somewhere else. I've cried a lot because of some people being pretty rude. Have a really thick skin now because of it. But just be nice. A lot of them are there for the love of that land. And if you're coming to a public land, you should be loving it too.
Yeah. And that's one of those things. It belongs to the people, and it's the people's job to not to love it and cherish it and maintain it for future generations. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. And it is hard to deal with people that have no idea what you deal with day by day, and then they come in a bad mood, and yeah, I'm sure it gets pretty stressful.
So just love on people. I think be happy. That's what I was telling Legit before, is that I've really tried to focus on positive things in my life, and that has helped a lot, especially after feeling lots of negativities for 3 years, where it led to a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety in my life. I would say I've never felt so anxious in my life.
Hmm.
That it did take a lot to kind of be okay with that. And that was little small victories in my life, I will say. I was loving the positive little things that I did. It could be like, I cleaned my room, I did my dishes, I brushed my hair, which sounds bad, but sometimes you're just like, I just want to throw my hair in a ponytail and walk
Yeah.
out the door. So little victories really made my healing journey a lot easier.
Yeah. And at a certain point, that's the best you can do. And that's better than not doing anything, because then you just stay there or you sink even deeper.
Mhm.
And I thought I was depressed for a long time. And then I realized actually my life just sucks, man. It was just one thing after another, not necessarily just personally stuff. It was stuff going on in my family and things
Mhm.
I had almost no control over. And then what I did have control over, which was my reaction and the way I was responding to it, I didn't do that good of a job and
Mhm.
checked out in a lot of ways, just stop engaging with friends and coworkers. But I'm glad I was able to stay afloat and realize that, okay, your life sucks now, but that it doesn't have to stay that way.
Mhm.
You keep going and you learn and you move forward.
Yep. And I know what this is going to be like, just a quick episode. And so I'm just going to end on self-care is important. Make sure all of you are taking care of yourselves. I'm excited to be back on this journey of the podcast, and I look forward to hearing all your comments and suggestions and just hearing all the positivity that comes from our listeners that we do have. And I look forward to the new ones that we will gain throughout this experience as well.
Hmm. Indeed, I feel the same way. I'm excited, and not in a like whoa type of way, but more like a yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the best way I can explain it.
We'll look forward to our new episode coming up soon, and we will talk to you all, or speak to you all, I guess.
Talk at you.
Talk at you.
Talk to each other,
Talk
and
to each other.
yeah.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Later, everyone.
Bye.